But what I'm doing today, I'm continuing looking at the arguments for the continuation of life after death. We believe that after death, the kingdom of heaven, that we continue, that our soul continues when our body dies. And we're looking at arguments for supporting that view. And we presented probably the weakest argument, first of all, but it still has a lot going for it. When we think about the vast majority of people who have ever lived on the earth, they all believed in life after death. And it's likely that the vast majority of us are right, rather than the minority. And so if the vast majority believe in life after death, therefore life after death is probably true, for that simple fact. But today we're going to step up the argument a bit more. It's still an argument that's only probable, but quite compelling. So we've gone from the testimony of the vast majority of people who've ever lived. Now we go on to the great and wise minds of history, of the past, who have believed in life after death. Now, your atheist friend will probably come in and ask you, well, how do you know these people are wise? What's your criteria for saying that they are wise? And we're not saying that we've selected these people because they believed in life after death, because that wouldn't prove anything. But we're presenting them as people who were right in so many other areas of investigation that it is unlikely that they were wrong about life after death too. So who are these people that we're talking about? We'll list some of them. There are many, many more. We can begin with Moses in the Bible. Great and wise man, great and wise lawgiver. We can think of Job in the Bible, grappling with the problem of evil and why does God allow evil? He believed in life after death. And then we can move away from Judaism to ancient Greece, to the great minds of ancient Greece. We can think of Socrates, perhaps the greatest philosopher of all time, and his pupil, Plato, and his pupil, Aristotle, and then a later philosopher called Plotinus, all from ancient Greece, arguing for life after death. And then we can look at other religions. We can say Zoroaster, Akhenaten, Lao Tzu, Confucius, the Buddha, Ramanja, Krishna, Muhammad for Islam, Maimonides for Islam, Avicenna for Islam. And then we can come into the later world, and we can say Augustine, Saint Augustine, greatest philosopher of the early medieval period. Thomas Aquinas, perhaps one of the greatest minds that's ever lived. And finally, Jesus. All these wise minds who are convinced about life after death. And arguably, their minds are far more impressive than a list of people who rejected life after death. We can list those. And I bet most of you have probably heard more of the first list than this list. So we've got those who don't believe in life after death: Epicurus, Lucretius, Machiavelli, time of the Renaissance, Hobbes, Lemaitre, Voltaire, the time of the Enlightenment, Comte, Karl Marx, Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, and the Englishman Bertrand Russell. So I would say that the first list as people are far more impressive than the second. And so for learning purposes, when you're in a tight corner at your dinner party, it would be good if you could learn the bare bones of this argument. And you could say, if what great sages of the past believe is true and is accepted by everybody as true, if what they believe is probably true, and these sages believe in life after death too, then life after death is probably true. That's that argument in a nutshell. So what we're going to do next now is go up another step to an even making the argument a bit more stronger, still only probable, but quite compelling. The next step up is to argue from the authority of Jesus. First of all, we've argued from the authority of the vast majority of people who have ever lived, what G.K. Chesterton called the democracy of the dead. All those who have lived before us would have all believed in life after death. Then we've gone to the wise minds of the past, the great minds of the past, who believed in life after death. They add their testimony as well, making it more compelling. And now we're adding to all those witnesses Jesus, the authority of Jesus. Now, this argument makes no claim. We're not claiming to our atheist friend that we're saying this because we believe Jesus is divine. We're not saying that at this moment. We're simply saying, and we're not saying that Jesus is infallible for the purposes of argument. It's simply arguing that as a teacher, and most people would say, what do you think about Jesus? And they said, well, he's a great teacher. Probably your atheist friend would say, well, I would say that Jesus was a great teacher, and that's all. A great moral teacher, he would say. He's had a great influence on the world for good. So it simply argues that as a teacher, if Jesus is right in everything he says, and your atheist friend would probably say, he is right on most things, I would say. He's a good teacher. If he's right in everything he says, as recorded in the Gospels, and if life after death was the central part of his teaching and crucial to it, is he likely to be wrong? So what do I mean by that? Just think for a moment of the most well-known part of Jesus' teaching. And we imagine him going up the hill and opening his mouth and proclaiming the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then if you look at the Gospel of Matthew, the whole of that sermon is recorded in chapters 5, 6, and 7 of the Gospel of Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, the most well-known part of Jesus' teaching. And the purpose of that teaching is Jesus telling us how he wants us to behave in this world, giving us a way of life, a way of how we respond in every situation that we'll come to in life. Every single bit of that teaching we find in Matthew chapters 5 to 7 presumes the reality of life after death. Life after death is the justification and the only justification that Jesus has for telling us to love our enemies. What would be the point of that if there is no life after death? Why would he say it? There's no reason. It wouldn't make any sense. He tells us to love our enemies because there is life after death. It is the reason for it and the foundation for that teaching and all his other teachings. That he's presuming that life after death is a reality. So if life after death does not exist, if we die and that's it, we have to say that Jesus is completely and utterly wrong in all his teaching about life. And not only that, dangerously so, because we are living our lives in a way that makes no sense and putting our lives at risk when there is no life after death, if he's wrong. So if life after death does not exist, we would need, as sensible human beings who need to protect our skins to survive, we would need to reject every aspect of Jesus' teaching, throw it out, open the dustbin and put the Gospels in there and never look at them again. Because Jesus was either a lunatic, mad, or he was malevolent, bad, the worst man who has ever lived, because he is deluding the whole human race. That would be the only sane response to what we read in the Gospel, if there is no life after death. So either life after death exists, or Jesus was totally wrong about his teaching, because life after death is the central motive of his teaching. Now, it is highly unlikely Jesus was mistaken, given who he was, the goodness of his life, the sureness of the way he speaks. And therefore it's very likely that there is life after death. So let's take all this together. Bring it all together. Humankind's opinion through all the ages of history have said that they believe in life after death. Remember G.K. Chesterton's brief summing up of all those who have gone before us, the democracy of the dead. Trillions and trillions of people that have lived before us would have all believed in life after death. And then the wisdom of the preeminent sages. Think of them all: Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, St. Augustine, Aquinas, all the ones that we listed before. All these great, great minds and good people believed in life after death. So all that's added to the vast majority of people. Then those who are held to be wise by all ages and by all types of people, whether you believe or not, believe in life after death. And then finally, Jesus himself, the preeminent sage of all sages, wise people. Jesus is held as the most preeminent in terms of his teaching, believed in life after death. So all these probable arguments, and they're only probable, and therefore they're weaker than other arguments, but brought together like the threads in a rope. You've got one thread and it's easily broken. But if you add that thread to another thread and another thread and another thread, and you twist them all together, then you get an unbreakable rope. And with these arguments, bringing them together, as I've just done them, twisting them together, as it were, the argument becomes very compelling indeed, even though it's only probable. Okay, so that's all for today. Next time, we're going to go on to much stronger arguments, the arguments from reason. We've looked at the arguments from authority, which are probable, authority of the past, the authority of sages, the authority of Jesus. Next time, we're going to go on to stronger arguments from reason itself, that it's more compelling because it adds up to a reasonable argument, is what we're going to look at next. So thank you, and we'll talk next time. Bye for now.
Thank you so much, Father John.
Okay.